What would you do if a simple search for headache relief in your spouse's toiletry bag suddenly revealed a secret so devastating that it would shatter everything you thought you knew about your marriage, your family, and the person sleeping next to you for over a decade? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Picture this: it's early morning, and Sarah Mitchell is battling one of those migraines that feels like a sledgehammer to the temple. You know the kind I'm talking about, the ones that make even the softest light feel like needles piercing your eyes. Has this ever happened to you? That desperate moment when you'll search anywhere for relief, rummaging through medicine cabinets with trembling hands, hoping to find anything that might stop the pain. Sarah thought she was having just another ordinary morning. Her husband, Daniel, had left for his weekend errands, and she was alone with a splitting headache that refused to let up. The medicine cabinet was empty. No ibuprofen, no aspirin, nothing. But then she remembered something. Daniel always kept a travel pack of painkillers in his brown canvas shaving kit. Something about being prepared for office headaches. What happened next would change the course of her life forever. As Sarah unzipped that familiar toiletry bag, pushing aside the electric razor, cologne, and travel-sized shampoo, her fingers touched something unexpected. Not the familiar rattle of a pill bottle she was hoping for, but smooth cardboard packaging that felt completely wrong somehow. When she pulled it out and read the words, Plan B, Emergency Contraceptive, her migraine was instantly forgotten. Now, stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. This wasn't just about finding birth control pills in a husband's shaving kit. This was about finding them in the belongings of a man whose intimate relationship with his wife had been virtually non-existent for years. Sarah and Daniel hadn't been physically close since their daughter Emma disappeared 12 years ago. The weight of that tragedy had crushed any possibility of intimacy between them, leaving them as strangers sharing the same house, the same grief, but nothing more. So, whose were these pills? The obvious answer seemed to be another woman, perhaps someone younger, someone who could give. Daniel, what Sarah couldn't anymore, someone who didn't see their missing daughter's face in quiet moments. The betrayal cut deep, but there was almost a relief in having a concrete reason for the emotional distance that had grown between them like a chasm. But here's where this story takes a turn that no one could have predicted. When Daniel returned from his errands and found Sarah holding the package, his reaction wasn't what you'd expect from a guilty husband caught in an affair. There was no stammering, no ashamed confession, no desperate attempts at explanation. Instead, what followed was an explosion of rage so volcanic, so calculated and cruel, that it revealed something far more sinister than a simple extramarital affair. The man Sarah thought she knew for 18 years of marriage seemed to vanish in an instant, replaced by someone whose fury felt dangerous and whose words were designed to cut like surgical instruments. What you're about to discover about what was really happening in this seemingly ordinary suburban household will challenge everything you think you know about the people we trust most, the secrets that can hide in plain sight, and how a mother's desperate search for answers can uncover truths more horrifying than any nightmare. Because sometimes, the most innocent discoveries lead us down rabbit holes so deep and so dark that we realize we've been living with a stranger all along. Daniel's words hit Sarah like physical blows. "You paranoid bitch," he snarled, snatching the package from her trembling hands. The venom in his voice made her step backward instinctively. "Going through my things? This is what you do while I'm trying to keep myself healthy?" But Sarah had found something else tucked beneath those pills, a receipt that would prove her instincts right. The small white slip of paper from Walgreens in Riverside was dated from the previous Tuesday night, when Daniel had claimed he was working late on server, maintenance that couldn't wait until morning. The timestamp showed 8:47 p.m., but Riverside was 45 minutes away from his office. There were 3 pharmacies within 10 minutes of their house, yet he had driven almost an hour to make this purchase in a town where nobody would recognize him. This revelation triggered something explosive in Daniel that Sarah had never witnessed in 18 years of marriage. This wasn't the guilty stammering she expected from a husband caught in an affair. This was pure, calculated rage designed to destroy rather than deflect. "You're always looking for problems," he thundered, his face contorting with fury. "Always inventing things to be upset about because you can't accept that she's gone." Then came the words that would haunt Sarah forever. With his finger jabbed inches from her face, Daniel delivered the cruelest blow possible. "Emma is dead, Sarah. She's been dead for 12 years, and you're so messed up about it that you're seeing betrayal. Everywhere. You want to know what I think? I think you're losing your goddamn mind." But it was his final accusation that knocked the breath from her lungs completely. "Just like you betrayed Emma by not watching her that day." The guilt Sarah carried every single day, that she had stepped inside for just minutes to grab juice for her 4-year-old daughter, was now being weaponized against her. The deepest wound of her life, thrown in her face like acid by the one person who was supposed to understand her pain. The transformation in Daniel was so complete, so shocking, that Sarah realized she was looking at a stranger. This wasn't defensive behavior from someone caught in an embarrassing situation. This was the desperate fury of someone whose carefully constructed facade was crumbling, someone who had far more to hide than a simple affair. After Daniel stormed out of the house, slamming the door with enough force to rattle the windows, Sarah collapsed onto the bathroom floor. His words echoed in the silence like struck bells, each one designed for maximum devastation. "You failed as a mother. You couldn't keep our daughter safe in our own backyard." The accusation cut deeper than any physical blow could have, because it targeted the wound that had never healed, the guilt that whispered to her in quiet moments that maybe, just maybe, if she had stayed outside for those extra few minutes, Emma would still be with them. But as Sarah sat there on the cold tile, something began to shift in her mindset. Beneath the crushing weight of his cruelty, a discordant note played in her mind. She had seen Daniel guilty before. The time he forgot their anniversary, the weekend he claimed to be at a work conference but went fishing instead. When caught in those small marital lies, Daniel would go quiet, shoulders slumping, offering stammered apologies and promises to do better. He had never attacked her, never turned vicious like a cornered animal. This morning's explosion felt different, desperate, like someone protecting something far more significant than an extramarital affair. The revelation began to crystallize. This wasn't the behavior of a man caught cheating. This was the desperate fury of someone whose entire carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble. Sarah found herself walking toward Daniel's home office, her bare feet silent on the hallway carpet. This room had always been his domain, his sanctuary where he handled all their finances, paid bills, managed investments. "One less thing for you to worry about," he had always said, especially after Emma disappeared. She had been grateful then, too shattered to care about mundane things like electric bills and mortgage payments. The door was unlocked. He had left in such a hurry, storming out like the house was on fire. As Sarah pushed it open, afternoon sunlight streamed through the blinds to illuminate what had once felt like a safe space but now felt like a potential crime scene. The office was exactly what she expected. Meticulously organized, everything in its place. Daniel's desk dominated the room, its surface clear except for a desktop calendar and a cup of pens. Filing cabinets lined one wall, each drawer labeled in his precise handwriting. The man who couldn't remember to buy ibuprofen kept financial records like a Fortune 500 accountant. The transformation in how she viewed this space was startling. What had once represented Daniel's reliability and attention to detail now felt sinister, like evidence of someone who needed to control every detail because he had something massive to hide. Sarah approached Daniel's desk slowly, as if it might bite. Crossing this line felt monumental, a betrayal of marital trust that she never imagined herself capable of. But then she remembered the Plan B pills, the pharmacy receipt from Riverside, his explosive reaction to being questioned. Her fingers found the handle of the top drawer, and what she discovered. Inside would transform her understanding of the man she had shared a bed with for 18 years. Credit card statements organized by month, each one a neat column of their life documented in transactions. She scanned the familiar entries: Shell Station, Kroger, Dunkin' Donuts, where Daniel fed his morning coffee addiction in $4.67 increments. Everything looked normal. mundane, until she spotted the pattern that made her stomach clench. Walgreens Riverside, $63.19. Riverside was 45 minutes away when they had 3 pharmacies within 10 minutes of their house. Why drive that far for anything? Sarah pulled out more statements, spreading them across the desk surface like tarot cards revealing a hidden fortune. The Riverside Pharmacy appeared again and again, sometimes once a month, sometimes twice. The amounts varied: $47, $91, $55. But the frequency was consistent. Clockwork. Precision spanning months. She grabbed a pencil from Daniel's cup, circling each Riverside charge with trembling hands. The repetition formed a disturbing pattern, but there was more. Target in Riverside, $127. Kroger in Riverside, $89. Always that same town, always substantial amounts, always far from home where recognition was impossible. The revelation deepened when she found itemized charges where available. Women's deodorant. The brand Teenagers. Favored. Feminine hygiene products. Bottles of the fruity shampoo she remembered Emma begging for when she was little, the kind that smelled like strawberries and made bath time feel like playing dress-up. Children's vitamins. More Plan B pills purchased with methodical regularity. The shopping list read like provisions for a teenage girl, but Sarah's mind raced through possibilities that made her nauseous. A mistress with a child? A secret family Daniel had maintained for years? It would explain the products, the distance to avoid recognition, his defensive rage that morning. But the time frame troubled her. These charges went back at least 3 years, long before their marriage had truly fractured under the weight of Emma's disappearance. Each transaction revealed a hidden life, a parallel existence that Daniel had maintained with the same meticulous attention to detail he applied to everything else. The geographic distance wasn't random. It was calculated, chosen, specifically to create a barrier between his secret activities and their shared reality. Every purchase, every trip, every carefully documented expense painted a picture of someone living a double life with surgical precision. The locked drawer in Daniel's desk had always been forbidden territory. Important documents, he'd explained years ago, tax records that need to stay organized. Sarah had never questioned it, respecting his need for private space just as he respected her craft room. But now, with her world crumbling around her, respect felt like naivety. The key was exactly where she expected, taped beneath the desktop calendar. Daniel was predictable in his habits, secure in the knowledge that Sarah would never violate his trust. The tape came away easily, the small brass key warm in her palm like it had absorbed years of his body heat. This tiny piece of metal felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried the weight of secrets that were about to reshape everything she thought she knew about her marriage. The drawer opened smoothly, revealing hanging files labeled with years. Sarah pushed past old tax returns, their joint returns that she'd signed without reading, trusting Daniel to handle everything correctly. Behind their passports and marriage certificate, tucked at the very back where no casual search would find them, she discovered a manila folder that didn't match the others. No label, no year, just anonymous brown paper hiding what would prove to be the most devastating revelation of her life. Inside were utility bills that made her hands shake. Electric, water, gas, all for 1847 Oak Avenue in Riverside, all showing regular usage patterns, the amounts suggesting full-time occupancy. Someone was living there, using power, running water, heating the space during winter months. The bills went back years, a paper trail of a life being lived in complete secrecy. Each statement revealed the methodical precision with which Daniel had maintained this hidden existence. Electric bills showing consistent monthly usage, water bills indicating regular consumption, gas bills proving someone was cooking, heating, existing in that space. This wasn't a vacation rental or an investment property that sat empty most of the year. This was evidence of continuous habitation, of a life being carefully sustained away from prying eyes. The transformation in Sarah's understanding was seismic. Every Saturday when Daniel left for his errands, hardware, store, car wash, sometimes golf with his buddies, he was actually maintaining this secret household. Every lie, every casual deception, every moment he'd kissed her goodbye while knowing exactly where he was really going, now took on a sinister new meaning. The journey of discovery was leading her down a path that her mind desperately wanted to reject. A secret rental property would require disclosure, tax documentation, legitimate paperwork, but this was something else entirely. Something Daniel had hidden completely from their shared financial life, existing in a legal gray zone that allowed him to operate without questions or oversight. Sarah's phone came out instinctively, camera clicking as she documented everything. Credit card statements, utility bills, the pattern of deception that painted a picture too terrifying to fully acknowledge. She replaced everything exactly as she'd found it, even retaping the key beneath the calendar. Daniel's Saturday errands always took hours. Hardware store, car wash, sometimes 9 holes of golf with his buddies. She had time to drive to Riverside to see this address for herself. The decision to confront this revelation head-on marked a transformation in Sarah's mindset. For 12 years, she had been the grieving mother who accepted what she was told, who trusted that others were handling the investigation, who believed that Daniel was processing their shared tragedy in his own way. But now, faced with evidence of systematic deception, something fierce awakened in her, a mother's instinct that had been dormant too long. The GPS showed 43 minutes to Riverside, a straight shot down Highway 72 before turning onto smaller state routes. Sarah gripped the steering wheel of her Honda, knuckles white, watching familiar suburbs give way to scattered gas stations and empty fields. She'd made this drive before, years ago, when Emma was 2 and they'd gone apple picking at an orchard past Riverside. Daniel had complained the whole time about the distance, said there were perfectly good orchards closer to home. Now she understood why he knew the area so well. Every mile felt like traveling back through time, retracing her husband's secret journeys while she had remained home, unknowing and unsuspecting. The route that should have felt foreign was oddly familiar, as if some part of her subconscious had always known this path existed, had always sensed that Daniel's Saturday absences held more significance than simple errands. The neighborhoods deteriorated as she drove deeper into Riverside. Well-maintained colonials gave way to smaller houses with chain-link fences and boats on blocks and driveways. Oak Avenue was nearly at the town's edge, where residential areas petered out into industrial lots and woods. Her GPS announced the final turn onto a road that hadn't seen fresh asphalt in decades, forcing her to slow to a crawl. Then she saw it. 1847. Oak Avenue squatted at the road's dead end, backed up against a tangle of woods. Sarah's first thought was that it looked sick. The small ranch house, probably built in the 60s judging by the low roofline and narrow windows, seemed to huddle in on itself like a wounded animal trying to hide. Yellow siding had faded to the color of old bones, and the front porch sagged in the middle like a frown. But it was the windows that made her skin crawl. Every single one was covered from inside. Heavy curtains on some, what looked like newspapers taped up on others. No hint of what lay beyond the glass, no glimpse into the life being lived behind those barriers. The yard told 2 different stories. Weeds had overtaken what might once have been flower beds, growing waist-high in places, while fresh tire tracks cut through the gravel driveway, multiple sets overlapping like evidence of regular visits. Sarah pulled over 3 houses down, tucking her Honda behind an abandoned pickup truck that provided partial cover. She turned off the engine and sat watching, cataloging details that painted a disturbing picture. A new padlock on the chain-link gate, brass bright against the rust-spotted fence. No newspapers in the driveway. No mail overflowing the box. The roof looked sound despite the house's sickly appearance. No missing shingles or obvious damage. This was a property that was maintained but deliberately hidden, a paradox that made her stomach clench with growing dread. Movement caught her eye. An elderly woman in a housecoat walking a small terrier, making her slow way along the broken sidewalk. Sarah made a quick decision, lowering her window as the woman approached and manufacturing what she hoped was a friendly smile. "Excuse me," she called out. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm looking at properties in the area. My husband and I are thinking of moving. Do you know much about the neighborhood?" The woman's face lit up at the prospect of conversation, shuffling closer with her dog sniffing at Sarah's tires. "Oh, honey, I've lived here 42 years. Used to be a nice area. Very quiet, still is mostly." But then her eyes darted toward 1847, and her expression shifted. "You're not thinking of that one, are you?" The transformation in the neighbor's demeanor was immediate and telling. When Sarah asked if there was something wrong with the property, the woman lowered her voice as if the house itself might overhear. "Strange place," she whispered. "Man comes and goes at all hours. Mostly at night. Drives a dark pickup truck, one of those big ones. Been doing it for years now." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. The description matched Daniel's truck perfectly. When she asked if the neighbor had ever tried talking to the mysterious visitor, the woman's face clouded with memory. "Tried once when he first started coming around. Wanted to be neighborly, you know. But he just stared at me until I went back inside. Never said a word. Made me feel." She shivered despite the warm afternoon. "Something's off about him. Always alone. Always locking up careful-like." The timeline the neighbor provided sent chills down Sarah's spine. The property had changed hands maybe 14 or 15 years ago to some foreign investor she'd never seen. The night visitor started showing up soon after, a pattern that aligned perfectly with when Daniel's brother Michael had left for Thailand, granting Daniel power of attorney over his properties. But it was the neighbor's final revelation that made Sarah's blood run cold. "Sometimes I hear things late at night," the woman confided, glancing nervously at the house. "Machinery running like construction equipment, but in the morning nothing looks different. And once," she hesitated, then leaned closer. "Once I was walking Muffin here late, maybe midnight. She has a weak bladder, you know, and I saw his truck there. Got curious, tried to peek over the fence." The neighbor's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Nothing. But he must have spotted me because suddenly he was at the gate, just standing there in the dark. Didn't say anything, didn't move, just stared until I hurried home. I don't walk past there at night anymore." The impact of these revelations crashed over Sarah like ice water. The methodical night visits, the intimidating surveillance, the sounds of unknown activity. It all painted a picture of someone maintaining something in that house that required absolute secrecy and complete control. Sarah's phone rang, shattering the moment like glass. Daniel's name on the screen made her stomach drop. She apologized to the woman, who continued on with her dog, casting one more nervous glance at 1847 before disappearing around the corner. "Where are you?" Daniel's voice was tight, controlled. The rage from this morning had crystallized into something colder, more calculating. Sarah could hear the transformation in his tone. This wasn't the concerned husband checking on his wife, but someone conducting an interrogation. "Grocery store," Sarah lied, surprised at how smoothly the deception came out. "Picking up things for dinner." The words felt foreign in her mouth, but necessary. She was learning to lie to her husband because the truth had become dangerous. "Which store?" The question came too quick, too sharp, probing for inconsistencies like a detective testing an alibi. "The Kroger on Madison," she replied, building the lie. "They were out of your coffee at the one on 5th. The silence that followed was loaded with suspicion. She could hear him breathing, could picture him processing her words, checking them for deception with the same methodical precision he applied to everything else. "I came home for my wallet," he said finally. "Forgot it this morning." Another lie, Sarah realized. He was checking on her, testing whether she was really where she claimed to be. "Oh, well, I should be back soon," she managed. The threat in his next words was subtle but unmistakable. "Good. We need to talk about this morning. I'll be home by 3. Come straight home." The line went dead, leaving Sarah staring at 1847 Oak Avenue with new understanding. If Daniel was monitoring her movements this closely, if he was that concerned about her being away from home, then whatever was behind those covered windows was worth protecting at all costs. She had maybe an hour before he returned, but first she needed to understand the legal foundation that had made this deception possible. Back at home, Sarah moved with desperate purpose through Daniel's office. The filing cabinets held decades of their life together, but her instincts pulled her deeper into the past, behind tax returns from years gone by. Her fingers found a folder that felt different, older, the manila worn soft at the edges. Inside was a power of attorney document dated 14 years ago, witnessed and notarized. Michael Caldwell, Daniel's younger brother, granting full control of his assets and properties to Daniel. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was crystal clear. Daniel could act as Michael in all financial matters. Memory flooded back with devastating clarity. Michael at their dining room table, excited about Thailand and some import-export opportunity. "Just need someone to watch the rental properties," he'd said, sliding papers across to Daniel. "Collect rent, handle repairs. Few months, maybe a year." Sarah remembered teasing him about finding a Thai bride while 5-year-old Emma colored at the table, tongue poking out in concentration. The transformation from innocent family favor to something sinister became clear. Michael had left 2 years before Emma disappeared, trusting his older brother completely. The power of attorney provided the perfect legal cover for maintaining a property that existed outside normal scrutiny, a space where someone could operate without questions or oversight for over a decade. Sarah pulled Emma's baby book from the shelf where it lived between photo albums, the weight of it bringing tears to her eyes. The faded pink cover with embossed teddy bears had documented their daughter's life in careful detail. First smile, first tooth, first steps. The pages after age 4 were blank, waiting for milestones that never came. But it was their old calendar from 2012 that would reveal the most devastating truth yet. Daniel's work schedule was marked in his neat handwriting throughout that terrible year. Before Emma disappeared, he worked day shifts only at the IT firm. Regular hours, home by 6 every evening. The promotion to systems administrator hadn't come yet, so his schedule was predictable, routine. But after Emma vanished, Sarah flipped forward through the weeks that followed those frantic first days when time had no meaning. Then, exactly 2 weeks after Emma disappeared, when the FBI scaled back their search and the volunteers went home, Daniel's schedule changed dramatically. Night shifts appeared like clockwork. System maintenance, he'd explained. Servers that could only be updated when the office was empty. The promotion required it. Came with a raise they desperately needed for the private investigator they'd hired. The transformation in Sarah's understanding was seismic. She'd been too shattered to question it then, grateful even that Daniel could function enough to work while she could barely leave Emma's room. But now, those night shifts took on a sinister new meaning. Every evening when Daniel kissed her goodbye, claiming server maintenance that couldn't wait until morning, he'd actually been visiting Oak Avenue, spending hours in that house with its covered windows while she grieved alone. Back in the filing cabinet, Sarah dug deeper into the power of attorney folder, finding more documents she'd never seen. Property transfers moving from Michael's name to something called DMC Holdings LLC. The signatures were Daniel's, perfectly legal with the power of attorney backing them up. A quick web search showed DMC Holdings had dissolved in 2015 with no forwarding information, no assets listed, but Oak Avenue remained somehow off the city's official books. The paper trail revealed a deliberate strategy to obscure ownership, creating a legal maze that made the property effectively invisible to anyone who wasn't actively searching. Taxes were paid from phantom accounts, utilities maintained through shell companies, everything designed to let a man visit regularly without questions or oversight. The methodical precision was breathtaking in its calculated deception. This wasn't just about hiding an affair or maintaining a secret investment. This was about creating a space that existed outside normal scrutiny, where someone could operate for years without detection. The impact of this revelation crashed over Sarah like a physical blow. Every system that should have provided oversight or protection had been systematically circumvented. The journey toward understanding was leading her to a conclusion so horrifying that her mind refused to fully accept it. But the evidence was undeniable. Daniel had used his brother's trust, his own technical expertise, and his wife's grief to create the perfect cover for something that required absolute secrecy and complete control. Sarah photographed everything quickly: the power of attorney, property transfers, the calendar pages that showed Daniel's schedule changes. Evidence of something monstrous taking shape, but still too terrible to fully acknowledge. She replaced everything exactly as found, retaped the key beneath the calendar, and prepared for what might be the most dangerous conversation of her marriage. When Daniel's truck rumbled into the driveway, she was ready. Groceries unpacked, coffee brewing, playing the role of the dutiful wife home from errands. But the knowledge burning in her mind made every ordinary gesture feel like performance art. Her husband had maintained a secret property for over a decade, visiting at night while she grieved their missing daughter, buying supplies for someone who required feminine hygiene products and emergency contraception. The transformation in how she saw Daniel was complete. The man who'd held her while she cried, who'd spoken at press conferences pleading for Emma's return, who'd supported her through therapy and breakdown after breakdown. That man was either gone or had never existed at all. In his place was someone whose capacity for deception ran so deep that it challenged everything she thought she knew about human nature. But before she could confront him, before she could demand answers that might destroy what remained of their family, the front door burst open. Lisa swept in without knocking as usual, carrying a wine bottle and an oversized charcuterie board. "Surprise, sis! Hope you're not having a crisis because I brought reinforcements." Lisa's buoyant energy felt jarring against the tension that had been building all day. She immediately launched into stories about her week, pouring wine and chattering about neighborhood gossip with the oblivious enthusiasm that had always defined her personality. To Sarah, it felt like watching someone dance on a minefield, completely unaware of the explosives beneath their feet. Daniel appeared, freshly showered and wearing that careful neutrality that Sarah now recognized as his default mask. But Lisa's presence seemed to unsettle him in a way Sarah had never noticed before. His responses were shorter than usual, his smile not quite reaching his eyes, like someone calculating how quickly he could make this social obligation end. Then Lisa said something that changed everything. "Oh, Marcus, you'll never guess what I saw driving over here." She laughed, already pouring herself more wine. "That creepy abandoned house on Oak Avenue, the yellow one that looks like it should be condemned? I swear I saw your truck there earlier. You flipping houses now without telling us?" The temperature in the room plummeted. Daniel went very still, not the casual stillness of someone listening, but the frozen alertness of a predator suddenly exposed. The transformation lasted barely 2 seconds before he laughed, but Sarah caught the micro-expressions, the tightening around his eyes, the almost imperceptible flare of his nostrils, the way his jaw clenched before the easy smile appeared. "Lisa, there must be 50 dark pickup trucks in this town," he said with practiced amusement. "Half of them probably have veteran stickers. That house has been empty for years." But Lisa persisted with the innocent determination that made her such a good real estate agent. "I don't know. It looked exactly like yours. Same chrome running boards and everything. Plus, I recognized the flag sticker, the one with Emma's handprint that she made in kindergarten." The mention of Emma's handprint sticker hit Daniel like a physical blow. That flag. Decal, proudly chosen by their 5-year-old daughter at a school Veterans Day craft fair, became the detail that shattered his carefully maintained facade. For a moment, his mask slipped completely, revealing something raw and desperate underneath before he scrambled to rebuild his defenses. Daniel's explanation came out tangled, too detailed yet making no sense. "Tom, from accounting," he stammered, then corrected himself. Or was it Tim from systems? Looking for investment properties, maybe a fixer-upper to live in. The story shifted with each sentence. Technical real estate terms jumbled with IT jargon that didn't belong together. For someone who usually spoke with precision, the verbal chaos was damning. Lisa's eyebrows rose with each contradiction. "That doesn't sound right," she said slowly, her real estate experience picking apart his flimsy explanations. "Are you sure you weren't there? Because I could have sworn." Daniel's phone buzzed urgently, and he grabbed it with desperate relief, turning away as he typed frantically. The transformation in his behavior was so obvious that even Lisa, usually oblivious to undercurrents, finally sensed the tension crackling through the room. Sarah watched him texting with growing horror, her mind racing through possibilities. If Emma was alive, if she was at that house, was Daniel warning someone to hide, to stay quiet? The thought that her daughter might be 45 minutes away while he sent messages to keep her hidden made Sarah's vision blur with rage and desperation. She excused herself to the bathroom, hands shaking as she locked the door behind her. Her fingers fumbled with her phone, dialing 911 while turning on the faucet to mask her voice. The decision to make this call represented a point of no return. Either she was right and would save her daughter, or she was wrong and would destroy what remained of her family. 911. What's your emergency? The operator's voice was professional, calm, a stark contrast to the chaos in Sarah's mind. Please, she whispered into the phone, the water running loudly. I think my husband is holding someone captive at a house at 1847 Oak Avenue in Riverside. You need to send someone now. Ma'am, can you speak up? Are you in immediate danger? The questions felt impossible to answer coherently. How could she explain 12 years of deception, credit card patterns, utility bills, and a neighbor's testimony in a way that didn't sound like the paranoid ramblings of a grieving mother? I think my daughter is there, she continued, her voice breaking. Emma Caldwell. She disappeared 12 years ago when she was 5. He's been going to this house for years, buying girls' supplies, contraceptive pills. Even to her own ears it sounded fragmented, desperate. The operator promised to send a patrol car but cautioned that without concrete evidence of a crime in progress, their options were limited. A sharp knock rattled the bathroom door, cutting through her explanation. Sarah, everything okay in there? Daniel's voice was too close, like he'd been listening at the door. The mindset shift was complete. She was no longer talking to her husband, but to someone whose every word felt like a potential threat. She ended the call quickly, splashing water on her face to buy time while her heart hammered against her ribs. When Sarah opened the bathroom door, Daniel stood inches away, close enough that she had to press against the doorframe to avoid touching him. His eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her skin crawl. No longer the concerned husband, but something else entirely. Something predatory that had been hiding in their home for 12 years. You were in there a while, he said, his voice conversational but his body language anything but casual. Stomach's upset, Sarah managed. Must be stress from everything today. His gaze dropped to her hands, noting they were steady now, then back to her face with laser. Focus. Who were you talking to? The question came out sharp, accusatory. What? No one. I wasn't talking to anyone. I heard voices, Sarah. His tone remained conversational, but his body blocked her exit from the narrow hallway. The transformation in him was complete. The mask of matrimonial concern had finally slipped, revealing someone who viewed her not as his wife, but as a potential threat to be neutralized. Were you on the phone? From the living room, Lisa's voice rang out, cheerfully, oblivious to the dangerous undercurrents. I'm ordering pizza. What does everyone want? Daniel, I know you hate mushrooms. The mundane question shattered the moment like glass, forcing Daniel to step back just enough for Sarah to squeeze past, but his hand found the small of her back, guiding her with false solicitude that felt more like herding prey. Back in the living room, Daniel immediately positioned himself beside Sarah on the couch, closer than necessary, his arm settling around her shoulders in what would look affectionate to Lisa but felt like being held in place. Every movement was calculated, designed to maintain the appearance of normalcy while ensuring Sarah couldn't escape his surveillance. The impact of this realization hit her like a physical blow. How long had he been watching her this closely? How many of her movements over the years had been monitored, catalogued, controlled? The journey toward understanding had led her to the horrifying conclusion that she'd been living with someone who viewed her as another asset to be managed rather than a partner to be trusted. Lisa chattered about pizza options while Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. She needed those keys. The brass key to Oak Avenue was somewhere on Daniel's ring, probably in his pocket or on the entry table where he always left them. But getting them would require a level of deception she'd never attempted before. On impulse, Sarah positioned herself at the bottom of the stairs, gripping the banister as an idea formed. "Daniel, thank God you're home," she called out as his truck door slammed. "Can you help me?" When he appeared in the doorway, she let out a sharp cry of pain, letting her knees buckle just enough to sell the performance. "I twisted my ankle carrying the groceries in. I think it might be sprained." The choreographed chaos that followed was perfect. Lisa jumped up to help, wine sloshing, while Daniel moved to steady Sarah with practiced concern. In that moment of manufactured crisis, Sarah's hand shot out toward the entry table where his keys lay in their usual spot. The heavy ring with its collection of familiar and unfamiliar brass felt warm, as if it had absorbed his body heat and his secrets. Daniel moved faster than Sarah had ever seen him move. His hand clamped around her wrist like a vice, all pretense evaporating in an instant. The caring husband, the concerned partner, that mask didn't just slip, it shattered completely, revealing something dangerous and desperate underneath. "Give them back!" His voice was low, stripped of any warmth, while his fingers ground into the delicate bones of her wrist hard enough to leave bruises. The transformation was so complete that Sarah realized she was looking at a stranger, someone whose capacity for violence had been carefully hidden beneath years of domestic normalcy. "Daniel, what the hell?" Lisa tried to wedge herself between them, but Daniel's free hand shoved her aside, with shocking force. Not gently, not apologetically, with the calculated aggression of someone who would remove any obstacle to getting what he needed. "The keys, Sarah. Now. Let go of her." Lisa recovered her balance, phone already in hand. "I'm calling the police." Those words seemed to break something in Daniel's mind. His eyes darted between Sarah's face, the keys, Lisa's phone, and she watched him calculate, watched him realize he'd revealed too much, gone too far, exposed the monster that had been living in their house for 12 years. His grip loosened fractionally. It was enough. Sarah wrenched free and ran. Behind her, Lisa's scream mixed with Daniel's roar of fury, but Sarah didn't look back. Her supposedly injured ankle worked perfectly as she sprinted through the front door across the lawn, keys clutched so tight they cut into her palm. Daniel's truck sat in the driveway like a waiting accomplice, and she didn't hesitate. The engine roared to life as Daniel burst from the house, his face contorted with rage and desperation. In the rearview mirror, Sarah saw him racing toward Lisa's Honda, saw her sister trying to block his path, saw him shove her aside again with the same calculated violence. The truck tires squealed as Sarah reversed wildly, clipping the mailbox before accelerating down their quiet suburban street. The journey that had started with a migraine and a search for painkillers had become a race where the stakes were measured in lives and sanity. Her phone was already at her ear as she blew through a red light, speedometer climbing past every legal limit. 911. The house on Oak Avenue, 1847. Oak in Riverside. My daughter is there, Emma Caldwell. She's been there for 12 years. My husband has her. The operator tried to get her to wait for units already en route, but Sarah threw the phone onto the passenger seat. 43 minutes in normal traffic. But normal was for people whose daughters hadn't been stolen, hadn't been kept like prisoners for over a decade. She knew Daniel's shortcuts from all those mysterious Saturday errands, but she also knew the back roads, the ways around construction zones and traffic lights. 25 minutes. That's all it took. Driving like death itself was chasing her. Maybe it was. Oak Avenue materialized in the growing dusk, the sick house squatting at its end like a malignant tumor. The brass padlock gleamed on the gate, but Sarah didn't slow down. The truck smashed through in an explosion of metal and chain link, the gate wrapping around the front bumper with a shriek of tortured steel. Metal and debris exploded around the truck's front end as 12 years of desperate maternal energy found its physical expression in twisted metal and shattered barriers. She kept going, ramming into the front porch steps before killing the engine. The reinforced front door might as well have been made of paper against her adrenaline-fueled determination. When it wouldn't yield to her shoulder, she grabbed a garden spade from the overgrown yard, its handle rough with rust and neglect, and attacked the front window with methodical fury. The safety glass cascaded inward like ice crystals, and Sarah cleared the remaining shards before climbing through, dropping into a living room that looked disturbingly normal. Dated furniture from the early 2000s, clean surfaces, a television that belonged in a time capsule, like stepping into a museum exhibit of ordinary suburban life. The transformation from the house's sickly exterior to this carefully maintained interior was jarring, designed to create cognitive dissonance in anyone who might accidentally discover it. But the industrial deadbolts on every interior door told the real story. These weren't the simple locks of a normal home. They were heavy-duty restraints, the kind used in prisons or secure facilities, installed with surgical precision throughout what should have been a typical family space. The facade of normalcy was exactly that, a carefully constructed lie designed to hide something monstrous. "Emma!" Sarah screamed through the broken window, her voice echoing through the house. "Emma! It's Mommy!" She moved on pure instinct, finding a door that should have led to a pantry but sported 3 heavy deadbolts, all engaged. The installation was professional, methodical, designed by someone who understood exactly what they were containing. From below, muffled by walls and distance, she heard movement, then a voice, young and terrified, that made her knees nearly buckle. "Daddy?" The word carried the same slight lisp Emma had as a child, the same cadence that Sarah had heard in 1,000 bedtime stories and morning conversations. But this voice belonged to a teenager, someone who had grown up in this basement prison while Sarah searched the world above. The voice that called out wasn't the 5-year-old who had disappeared from their backyard, but someone whose vocal patterns carried the unmistakable echo of the daughter she had lost. The impact of hearing that voice, familiar yet foreign, innocent yet shaped by unimaginable circumstances, threatened to shatter what remained of Sarah's composure. Her hands shook as she attacked the locks with Daniel's keys, the brass metal sliding home with mechanical precision. Each tumbler that clicked open represented a barrier that had kept her daughter imprisoned for over a decade, kept her isolated from the mother who had never stopped searching, never stopped hoping, never stopped believing that somehow, somewhere, Emma was still alive. The door swung inward, revealing stairs descending into darkness that felt wrong, that carried the scent of industrial cleaner mixed with something else, something human and desperate that spoke of years spent in confinement. At the bottom of those stairs waited answers that would either vindicate 12 years of maternal instinct or destroy what remained of Sarah's understanding of reality. Sarah flew down the stairs, finding another door at the bottom with a small reinforced window. The basement felt wrong in ways that defied description. Too clean, too organized, like a space designed for containment rather than living. When a face appeared in that window, Sarah's knees nearly buckled under the weight of recognition mixed with devastation. 17 years old, blonde hair grown long and tangled, skin pale as paper from years without sunlight. The face had the angular features of late adolescence, marked by a gauntness that spoke of carefully controlled nutrition rather than starvation. But the eyes, those green eyes she had counted lashes on when Emma was a baby, the same eyes that had looked up at her with perfect trust in their backyard sandbox, those were unmistakably her daughter's. 12 years had transformed her baby into a young woman, but the essence remained. The slight upturn at the corners of her eyes, the way her left eyebrow sat just a fraction higher than her right, the small scar on her chin from a tumble off her tricycle when she was 3. This was Emma, alive, breathing, real, but marked by years of something so terrible that Sarah's mind recoiled from fully processing it. "Emma," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. "Oh, God. Emma, it's Mommy. I'm here to take you home." But instead of the joyful recognition she had dreamed of for 12 years, Emma shrank back from the door, hands covering her ears, fear, twisting her features into an expression of pure terror. "I don't know you," Emma said, her voice higher than it should have been, carrying the inflection of someone much younger despite her physical maturity. "Where's Daddy? He said no one was allowed down here. I've been good. I promise I've been good." The transformation in Sarah's understanding was immediate and devastating. The girl who should have run toward rescue instead cowered in terror, her mind shaped by years of careful manipulation that had rewired every instinct for survival and safety. Emma wasn't just physically imprisoned, she was psychologically chained to her captor in ways that made freedom feel like abandonment, rescue feel like attack. Sarah attacked the door with the garden spade, wood splintering under her desperate assault, while behind the barrier Emma keened like a wounded animal. The sound was heartbreaking. Not the cry of someone being rescued, but the wail of someone whose entire world was being destroyed by what should have been salvation. Heavy footsteps thundered on the stairs above. Daniel, breathing hard, his face twisted with rage and something else, possessiveness that ran so deep it had convinced him that imprisonment was protection, that isolation was love. "You don't understand," he panted, reaching for Sarah. "She's sick. She needs special care. I protected her from the world, from people who would hurt her." The impact of his words hit like physical blows in his twisted mindset. The basement prison had been an act of love, a father's ultimate sacrifice to shield his daughter from dangers that existed only in his imagination. 12 years of stolen childhood, of psychological conditioning, of systematic abuse, all justified in his mind as protection. Sarah swung the spade in a wide arc, catching Daniel across the temple. Blood ran down his face, but he barely staggered. "You stole her!" she screamed. "You stole our baby." The transformation in his expression was chilling. Not guilt or shame, but the injured righteousness of someone whose twisted worldview had been challenged. "She's mine," he said, wiping blood from his forehead with casual indifference. "I saved her. I kept her safe." His voice carried the conviction of someone who had spent 12 years convincing himself that imprisonment was protection, that stealing a child's life was an act of love. The mindset that had allowed him to function normally while maintaining this horrific secret was fully on display now, a man so deep in his delusion that he genuinely believed he was the hero of this story. "Safe? From what?" Sarah demanded, but Daniel's hands were already reaching for her throat, his fingers closing around her neck with practiced precision. He had calculated this moment, planned for the possibility that his secret might be discovered, and his response was as methodical as everything else in his life. Then sirens screamed outside, police voices echoing through the broken house above. Heavy boots thundered across the floor, and suddenly the basement was flooded with law enforcement, weapons drawn, shouting commands that cut through the psychological horror like spotlights piercing darkness. Daniel froze, his hands falling away from Sarah's throat as he assessed this new reality. The man who had controlled every detail of this situation for over a decade suddenly found himself outmaneuvered by forces beyond his manipulation. His shoulders sagged in defeat, and he dropped to his knees with his hands behind his head, but his eyes never left the door where Emma huddled. "Emma, remember what Daddy taught you," he called out, his voice carrying layers of conditioning that had been reinforced over thousands of days and nights. "Remember our lessons." Even in surrender, he was still trying to control her, still pulling the psychological strings that had kept her compliant for 12 years. The scene that should have been a joyful rescue became a tableau of psychological horror. Emma, seeing armed officers surrounding the only parent she remembered, began screaming with a desperation that broke everyone's heart. "Don't hurt my daddy. Please don't hurt him. He takes care of me. He protects me." The victim was defending her captor against her would-be saviors, her mind so thoroughly programmed that she couldn't distinguish between safety and danger, between love and control. The officers had to physically restrain Emma to keep her from throwing herself between them and Daniel. Her cries echoed through the basement, not gratitude for rescue, but terror at losing the person her conditioned mind believed was keeping her alive. The journey toward understanding the full scope of Daniel's psychological manipulation was just beginning, but already it was clear that freeing Emma's body would be simple compared to freeing her mind. They had to cut the door open with specialized equipment. Inside, investigators found 12 years of horror, disguised as care, a space that told the story of systematic psychological manipulation more clearly than any testimony could. A small bed with restraints built into the frame, not crude rope or chains, but medical-grade equipment designed for long-term use, chemical toilets that could be controlled from outside the room, textbooks for homeschooling that progressed methodically from kindergarten through high school, every page filled out in Emma's careful handwriting. The transformation from childhood innocence to teenage survival was documented in those notebooks. Math problems solved with precision, essays about books she'd never chosen to read, science experiments conducted in isolation. Daniel had maintained her intellectual development while systematically destroying her psychological independence, creating someone who was educated but completely dependent, intelligent but utterly controlled. Bottles of medications lined makeshift shelves, sedatives for when she became difficult, antipsychotics to manage what Daniel labeled as episodes, and birth control pills with a regularity that made the investigators' stomachs turn. The Plan B packages, used and discarded, told their own horrific story of a father who had stolen his daughter's childhood and then stolen her adolescence as well. Exercise equipment sat in one corner, weights and a stationary bike that explained Emma's physical health despite years of confinement. Every detail revealed Daniel's methodical approach to maintaining his victim, keeping her body strong enough to survive while ensuring her mind remained completely dependent on him for survival, safety, and identity. The psychiatric wing of Riverside General Hospital felt like another world entirely. Sterile white walls, locked doors with reinforced glass, and the distant sound of someone crying created an atmosphere that somehow felt more oppressive than the basement had been. Sarah stood at the observation window, hands pressed against the cold surface, watching the stranger who was her daughter. Emma sat on the narrow bed in a fetal position, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tight around them as she rocked in a rhythm that seemed both soothing and desperate. The hospital gown they'd given her looked foreign against her pale skin, and she kept tugging at it like it was causing her physical pain. She'd fought off every attempt by female staff to help her, only allowing male doctors and nurses to approach. Conditioning that spoke to 12 years of systematic programming about who could be trusted and who represented danger. Dr. Martinez, the trauma specialist, explained the heartbreaking reality with clinical precision. Emma's mind had been so thoroughly conditioned that she couldn't process the concept of rescue. In her understanding, Daniel wasn't her captor, but her protector, the only person standing between her and a world that would hurt her. The hospital staff weren't there to help, but to punish her for some unknown transgression. Every few minutes, Emma would ask the same question in a voice that broke everyone's heart. "When is my daddy coming to take me home?" The impact of hearing those words, daddy, home, applied to the monster who had stolen 12 years of her life was devastating for everyone involved, but especially for Sarah, who had to watch her daughter grieve for her captor. The sterile hospital room became another prison for a young woman who had learned to fear the very freedom that others took for granted. Dr. Patel, the trauma specialist assigned to Emma's case, spoke with the careful precision of someone who had seen the worst of human behavior, but never quite this systematic, this methodical in its cruelty. Stockholm Syndrome in its most extreme form, Dr. Patel explained to Sarah, watching Emma through the observation window, combined with 12 years of conditioning, isolation, and complete psychological control. In her mind, Daniel isn't her captor. He's her protector, her whole world. We're the threat. The transformation in how Emma perceived reality was so complete that rescue felt like punishment, freedom felt like abandonment, and her mother felt like a stranger who had somehow invaded her safe space. 12 years of isolation had created a mind that couldn't distinguish between protection and imprisonment, between love and control, between safety and captivity. Every interaction with Daniel had been carefully orchestrated to reinforce his role as savior and provider, while the outside world was painted as chaotic and dangerous. Emma's dependence wasn't just emotional, it was foundational to her entire understanding of how the world worked. Meanwhile, Detective Morrison was building a case that revealed the true scope of Daniel's depravity. The locked room on the second floor of the Oak Avenue house had yielded hundreds of photographs spanning decades. Children at playgrounds, schools, public pools, all taken from a distance with telephoto lenses, all focusing on girls between the ages of 3 and 6. The impact of seeing these images was devastating for investigators who realized they were looking at evidence of patient, methodical stalking that had gone on for years. Some of these go back 20 years, Morrison explained to Sarah, her voice heavy with the weight of what they'd discovered. Long before Emma was born. We've checked. No other missing children match these photos. Your daughter appears to have been his only victim, but he was planning, watching, waiting. The photographs painted a picture of a predator who had been patient for decades, studying potential victims, learning their routines, waiting for the perfect opportunity that eventually came wrapped in the trust of fatherhood. The revelation that Emma had been Daniel's target from birth was perhaps the most horrifying aspect of the entire case. Her own father had been planning her captivity since she was an infant, grooming her, from her earliest memories to accept his control as normal, his attention as special, his isolation of her as protection. The journals they found detailed his observations of Emma's development, his careful manipulation of her trust, his systematic destruction of her ability to conceive of life beyond his control. The journey toward understanding the full scope of Daniel's manipulation was revealing layers of calculated evil that challenged everyone's understanding of human behavior. This wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity, but a decades-long project of psychological engineering designed to create the perfect victim, someone who would never want to leave because she had been programmed from childhood to believe that leaving meant death. The investigation into Daniel's methods revealed the true genius of his psychological manipulation. Every lesson Emma had received, every story he'd told her, every interaction they'd shared had been designed to create a prison built not of walls, but of fear, more effective than any physical barrier ever could be. He had taught her that the outside world was full of people who would hurt her, that diseases and dangers lurked everywhere beyond the basement walls, that only his protection stood between her and certain death. The mindset he had instilled was so comprehensive that Emma genuinely believed the hospital staff were trying to poison her when they offered medication, that the female nurses were part of some conspiracy to harm her, that every comfort they provided was actually a trap designed to make her vulnerable. Daniel had spent 12 years programming her to distrust everyone except him, to fear every environment except the basement, to see rescue as attack and freedom as abandonment. His manipulation went deeper than simple fear tactics. He had created elaborate stories about Sarah's death, complete with fabricated details about how she had gone to heaven when Emma was little, how she watched from above but could never return. These weren't casual lies, but carefully constructed narratives designed to make Emma's real mother feel like an imposter, a stranger claiming to be someone who existed only in Daniel's fictional universe. The transformation in understanding came when Detective Morrison contacted Michael in Thailand. Daniel's brother had been living his dream life, running a successful import business, completely unaware that his power of attorney had become the legal foundation for unimaginable evil. The phone call that brought him back to the States was devastating, learning that his trust had been weaponized, that his signature on innocent documents had enabled over a decade of systematic abuse. Michael's horror was genuine and complete. He had signed those papers believing he was helping his responsible older brother manage a few rental properties while he pursued opportunities overseas. The power of attorney had seemed like a simple family favor, a way to ensure bills got paid and maintenance issues got handled while he was thousands of miles away building a new life. The impact of this betrayal ran deeper than the legal implications. Michael had to confront the reality that his trust, his love for his brother, his desire to help family had been twisted into an instrument of lasting harm. The documents he had signed in good faith had provided the perfect cover for Daniel's crimes, creating a legal gray area that had protected the Oak Avenue house from scrutiny for over a decade. The journey toward understanding how deeply Daniel had planned this horror was revealing new layers of calculation with each piece of evidence. He had used his brother's dreams, his wife's grief, his daughter's innocence, and his own reputation as a devoted father to construct an elaborate facade that had fooled everyone, including law enforcement, for 12 years. Michael flew back immediately, horrified and determined to help however he could. The legal, Complexities would take years to untangle, but he had already hired lawyers to transfer everything to Sarah, to somehow make amends for the trust that had been so catastrophically misused. The transformation from innocent family helper to unwitting accomplice in unimaginable horror had shattered his understanding of his own brother, forcing him to confront the reality that love and trust could be weaponized by those who understood how to manipulate them. Sarah returned to the hospital every day, sometimes spending hours just sitting outside Emma's room, visible through the observation window but making no demands, creating no pressure. The journey toward rebuilding a relationship that had been stolen 12 years ago required patience that felt superhuman, but Sarah had waited this long. She could wait longer if that's what Emma needed. Dr. Patel had warned that the prognosis was guarded, but not hopeless. Years of therapy lay ahead, possible regression, the challenge of learning to exist in a world Emma had been taught to fear. Trust would come slowly, if at all. Emma might never fully recover the childhood that had been stolen from her, might always struggle with distinguishing between what was real and what was Daniel's programming. On the fourth day, Emma asked a question about the world outside. Just one sentence, but it represented the first crack in the psychological barriers Daniel had constructed. On the seventh day, she let Sarah sit closer, though still maintaining careful distance. The transformation was happening in increments so small they were almost invisible, but each tiny step represented monumental progress in dismantling 12 years of systematic conditioning. Then, on the 10th day, something shifted. Sarah was sitting in the visitor's chair reading aloud from a children's book that Emma might have enjoyed when she was 5, when she noticed Emma's hand had moved closer to the edge of the bed. Without looking up from the page, Sarah slowly extended her own hand, palm up, making no demands but creating an opportunity. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then Emma's fingertip touched Sarah's palm for less than a second before pulling back. The contact was barely anything. A butterfly landing and immediately taking flight, but it was everything. It was acknowledgement. It was the first voluntary human contact Emma had initiated with anyone other than Daniel in 12 years. The impact of that moment went far beyond the physical touch. It represented Emma's first independent decision to trust, her first step toward believing that maybe, just maybe, there could be safety and love beyond the psychological prison that had contained her entire conscious existence. That fingertip touch, lasting less than a second, was the first crack in walls that had seemed impenetrable. That single moment of contact became the foundation for everything that followed. Over the months that came next, Emma slowly began to understand that the world beyond Daniel's control wasn't the dangerous place she'd been taught to fear. The journey was long, filled with setbacks and breakthroughs, but each day brought small victories that proved the human spirit's incredible capacity to heal from even the most systematic attempts to destroy it. Sarah's story reminds us that sometimes the truth hides in the smallest details: a receipt in the wrong town, a neighbor's casual observation, a child's handprint sticker that becomes the thread that unravels everything. The signs are often there, waiting for someone brave enough to look beyond the facade and trust their instincts, even when doing so means confronting unimaginable possibilities. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, you understand something profound about the nature of truth, deception, and the incredible power of a mother's love. These are the stories that matter, the ones that reveal how ordinary moments can hide extraordinary secrets and how courage can emerge from the most desperate circumstances. I create content like this because I believe these stories need to be told, that we need to understand the psychology behind deception and the resilience of the human spirit. If you found value in how we explored this case together, I'd love to have you subscribe to the channel. There are more incredible true stories waiting to be uncovered, each one revealing something important about human nature and the world we live in. And if you made it all the way to this moment, leave me a comment saying, "Truth always surfaces." I read every single one, and it means everything to know that these stories resonate with people who understand their importance. Hit that like button if this story moved you, challenged you, or made you think differently about the people in your own life. Your engagement helps ensure these important stories reach others who need to hear them. There's a video right here that complements this topic perfectly. Another case where the truth was hiding in plain sight for years before someone finally had the courage to look closer. Click and continue with me over there, because some stories are too important to discover alone.